Hey guys, it's Camus, and we're going to look at another Coffeehouse chess opening. It's called the Blackburn Shilling Gambit, and that's supposedly after Joseph Blackburne apparently made a nice living fleecing amateurs with this gambit in bars. Unfortunately, there's no record of him actually using it, so the whole thing might be apocryphal. But anyway, the name has stood, and Steinitz mentioned it in a book. So we'll just continue as if this was Blackburn's actual opening. There's a good chance it was. He was the ultimate coffeehouse chess player. In doing the research for this opening, actually discovered he was a very interesting guy, and might want to do a biographical video and some of his games. He was, one of the ultimate romantic players, and if people had the audacity to sacrifice material against him, then he felt compelled to counter-sacrifice material. He was that kind of player. Very aggressive with the black pieces, and he was known as the Black Death. So anyway, just take a look at this opening. First thing I'm going to show you is the main trap, the reason why people want to play this. And then, since most of you were probably looking at these videos to see how to meet this as white, we'll quickly go into the refutation. And then finally, at the end of the tape, I'll present some lines if you're of a low enough moral caliber that you would actually want to play this. So anyway, let's look at it. This is from the Italian game. After 1e4, 1e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. This is a regular Italian game position. And now the thoroughly unprincipled knight to d4. Now this move has no function whatsoever. It doesn't threaten anything. It doesn't achieve any kind of positional gain. The only function is to lure the unwary into this diabolical trap. And okay, well, so we'll show you the main trap first. White takes the pawn on offer. Now black has this tricky move here. The knight is threatened. So the natural move, but not the best move, is to try to win some material by forking the rook and the queen. So knight takes f7 is the move that the amateurs love to play. And now queen takes g2. The rook is threatened with bad things. And the main trap goes rook to f1. Queen takes e4 check. Excuse me. Bishop to e2. And the difficult to spot knight to f3 is discovered mate. Excuse me, not discovered mate. It's a smothered mate. And okay, so that's the main trap. There's more to it, of course. Now let's go back to the starting position of the variation, and we'll look at what white should do if you want to play this as white. I'm going to switch put white at the bottom here. Okay, so actually practically any move you could play here is good because this is such a bad move from black. Although I must say that this gambit is more playable than the England gambit. The positions that black gets are bad, but not as bad as the one that you get from the refutation of the England. So keep that in mind. Okay, so as I said, any number of playable moves here for white. An easy, if you want just a simple way to play, you can play knight to c3, and you simply have a lead in development, and you're already in good shape here. Black has no pieces out. White is ready to castle. You can take that knight off on d4 anytime you want. Okay, that's the simple way. If you were looking for a bigger advantage, well, you can c3 is playable, maybe not the best. Castles is also playable. Knight takes e5, taking the pawn is actually playable. But I think the best move for white to get the biggest advantage is to play knight to d4, and that's what I recommend. It's not that complicated a line. Knight to d4, e takes d4, and now simply c3. And here, black has three replies that are seen, not necessarily the best moves. But excuse me, not necessarily the only moves. Let's see. He cannot play bishop to c5 because of bishop takes f7 check. And now black can go king takes f7. But after queen takes h5, g6, queen takes c5, black's position is a smoking ruin. Okay, so the other alternative here is a king to f8. But after bishop to b3, queen to f6, castles, d6, white is a clear pawn up and is really much better here. So I believe Rybka thinks this is close to winning, not quite. All right, so that takes care of bishop to c5 from this position. If he plays d takes c3, this is great for white. Knight takes c3, and look at this position. He's ready to castle. He's got 2 pieces out. Black has no pieces out. He's not ready to castle, and white is going to assume control of the center without any difficulty whatsoever. So this is a terrific position. Okay, so probably the best move for black is d5. And after the logical e takes d5, queen to e7 check, queen to e2, queen takes e2, king takes e2, bishop to d7. We've got to stop a threat on b5 there. C takes d4, and white is 2 pawns up. Now he's got these triple pawns in the center, and he also, his king has been temporarily inconvenienced. But it seems from computer analysis that black's compensation is thoroughly insufficient in this position. He could probably hang on to at least a couple of these pawns. Okay, so anyway, now you know what to do against the Shilling Gambit. Let's go back for the, as I said, the people that have less moral structure in their lives and would like to play this as black. So we'll turn it around and put this right here. Okay, so this is the main position. I'll go over again at the end what to do against white's best line, just as a refresher. But let's look at some of the other moves that black can play, that white can play here. Okay, so he can play knight c3, and we looked at that, He can also play c3. We didn't quite look at this. But I think black gets a decent position after knight takes f3, queen takes f3, and queen to f6 seems to be the best move. And white has played 3 moves in this position. Pretty much you do this same thing if he plays queen to e3, knight to e7, castles, knight to g6. And this is about equal. All right, there's nothing wrong with this position. If he plays queen to e2, trying to avoid the trade another way, we do basically the same thing. Castles, knight to g6, and the computer considers that white has a tiny edge in this position. Gary Lane seems to think that it's about equal. All right, so queen to f6 is actually good for black. Knight to f6, and black has a completely fine position. So c3 is not a worry. Let's go back to this position again. I mentioned knight to c3. Okay, so white plays knight to c3. You're behind in development, so you want to catch up as quickly as possible. White's doing fine now. And knight to d4, we looked at those lines. I guess I'll come back to that afterwards. As I said, white can also castle, and same thing, you just need to catch up in development, but your position is playable here. You're not losing the game right away. All right, so let's look at the fun stuff, the Gambit Accepted. Okay, so as I mentioned before, at this point you play queen to g5. Now, as I said before, you should look, certain writers have recommended that you should look worried and act like you didn't realize you were going to lose the pawn. Okay, this is all very, very unethical, but this is part of the Coffeehouse ethos. You know, trash talking and trying to distract your opponent. So acting comes into it as well. So here you're hoping for knight takes f7. Okay, there's a number of moves here, all of which lead to bad things for black. Now let's look at, for white. Let's look at white's best move here. He should play bishop takes f7. Okay, and Here it would be a mistake to play king to e7. You're pressuring the bishop, but you're going to run into trouble. I won't even bother showing these lines. The best move here is king to d8. And now there's a couple of moves been played here. If he plays castles, then we just take the knight. And after something like c3, knight to c6, d4, we play queen to f6, and white will likely play bishop to b3. And after d6, black actually is up a piece for 2 pawns. Now white has some compensation here, but in general, I think black is actually is fine. It's probably perhaps about dynamically equal. He does have this nasty looking center and a pawn roller in the offing, so black certainly has to be careful, and he still has to worry about where to put his king. So, it's a playable position, but this is pretty much the best that white can hope to achieve in this variation of the Gambit Accepted. Let's go back here. It would be a mistake in this position to play queen takes e4, because after rook to e1, queen to f5, you have rook to e8 checkmate. So just be careful of that possibility. As I said, after d4, just play queen to f6 and everything's good. Okay, so let's go back here. Another move from this position. We just looked at castles, or did we? Yeah, we looked at castles. Another move that's played here is knight to g4, but now black has the very strong knight to h6, and this is a winning move, or close to it anyway. If he plays knight takes h6, this loses to queen takes h2, and let's say he plays rook to f1, queen to e1 check. We're going to see this motif a lot. Queen to e2 is the only move, and queen takes e2 mate. So that doesn't work out so well. Said he can try to play d3, but he's losing the look. Excuse me, he's losing the rook on h1 here. Queen takes h1, king to d2, queen takes h2. Now we're hitting the knight, and so knight to g4. But after queen to f4, we're winning here. We're going to recover the bishop, and we have excellent position, completely winning for black. All right, so let's go back here. Another possibility, instead of knight to g4, is knight to f5, but we have another win here. Bishop to b4 check. c3 is the logical move, but after queen takes f2 check, his only move is to interpose the queen, and then we have checkmate. So lots of ways for white to go for white to go wrong in this variation. So let's go back here. This is after knight to g4, and we've just played knight to h6. So actually white's best move is c3, and then we have knight to c2 check, queen takes c2, queen takes g4, and if he castles, we play knight takes f7, and we're better. It's not an overwhelming position. Our king still has to find a safe refuge, and we have to complete our queenside development. But we are up a piece, and that has to count for something. All right, the computer definitely thinks black is better here. The other possibility is, instead of castling in this position that we just looked at, he can play bishop to c4, but after queen takes g2, again, rook to f1, knight to g4. We can't take on e4 this time because the queen's protecting it. And then say something like d4, knight to h2, and black is much better according to Ribka. So I can believe it. All right, so let's go back here, and that was knight to g4. So I believe that covers the variations after bishop takes f7. So these lines represent the best that white can hope to achieve in the Gambit Accepted lines. So really pretty much a guaranteed edge or winning position for black once this pawn is taken, which is good to know, because lots of people are going to take the pawn. All right, so let's look at the knight response. This is the typical response. Oh, I did have somebody play castles. Actually, it's the only time I've ever played this opening in something of a serious game. The My opponent totally panicked and played castles, and of course, you just take the knight off. So there we go. I don't know what happened to him. He just froze in horror, and we didn't have to play that game for very long. Okay, so but the normal response, the one that people will lick their chops greedily at, is knight takes f7. But then we play queen takes g2. Now we're going to come back to this position. White has three main responses. Okay, let's look at queen to h5. This doesn't work. After queen takes h1 check, bishop to f1, queen takes e4, bishop to e2, and then g6, queen to g4. We exchange queens, and we just take the knight, and we're up a piece, and we're also threatening knight takes c2. So black is winning here. So let's go back. Queen to h5 doesn't work. How about knight takes h8? Well, that doesn't work either. Queen to h1 check, bishop to f1, queen takes e4, and if he plays bishop to e2, we play knight to c2 check. If he doesn't want to lose the queen, he moves the king, but then we have queen to h1 is checkmate. Okay, another nice little line there. If he plays queen e2 instead, then, well, we just take the queen off. He recaptures. I mean, the game is over now, but this line is forced, so we may as well look at it. Bishop to f1. After d6, we're threatening bishop to h3 with terrible consequences for white. Okay, so that takes care of knight takes h8 in this position. Okay, so the main line is a rook to f1, and we followed up with queen takes e4. We already looked at bishop takes e2. That's the knight to f3 checkmate. That's your beautiful mate in 7 moves, which I assure you will get depending on where and who you play this against. Excuse me. So the main move is queen to e2, and what are we doing? We're just going to take the queen, and we've won. So there we go. There is the Blackburn Shilling Gambit, and it's actually quite nice. After the Gambit is accepted, black can look forward to a good game regardless. And many trappy lines for white to fall into. Now, one more time, let's look at the best line for white, and that is from this position here. After we've just played knight to d4, and so the best line that I recommend for white: knight takes d4, e takes d4, c3, d5, e takes d5, queen takes e7, queen takes e2, king takes e2, bishop to d7, c takes d4. And we're going to castle queenside and try to play against these triple pawns. And we may get 1 or 2 back. We do have some compensation here, but we are down 2 pawns. So it'd be interesting to know that Ribka rates this as being about half a pawn ahead for white. So it's not as much as you would expect from a two pawn advantage, but I think definitely the onus is on black to prove that he's got something here. All right, I hope you enjoyed this foray into Coffeehouse chess openings. I've got a whole bunch more we're going to look at, truly disreputable stuff, cheapo traps, and the like. So I hope you enjoy it, and please comment, rate, whatever. You know what to do. Okay, we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.